Clara June Brennan pressed her bleeding palms against the hot dirt of Silverton's main street, her body trembling from 3 days without food. 33 years old, and she was worth less than the dust clinging to her torn dress. "Please," she whispered to the woman, who'd just slammed a door in her face. "I just need work. I can cook." But the door stayed shut, like every door before it. If you want to follow Clara's journey from rock bottom to something beautiful, subscribe to this channel and watch until the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Clara's knees hit the wooden boardwalk hard. She didn't mean to fall. Her legs just gave out after the 5th door slammed in her face that morning. The July sun beat down on Silverton without mercy, and Clara hadn't eaten anything but wild berries for 3 days. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up right now." But her body wouldn't listen. A woman walked past, lifting her skirts to avoid touching Clara. 2 men crossed to the other side of the street. A child pointed before his mother yanked him away. Clara pressed her forehead against the rough wood and let herself feel it, the shame, the hunger, the bone-deep exhaustion. Just for a moment. Just long enough to gather whatever strength she had left. "You can't stay here, miss." Clara looked up. A man with a deputy's badge stood over her, his face more tired than cruel. "I'm not staying," Clara said. "I'm looking for work." "Ain't no work for drifters in this town." He shifted his weight. "You got kin somewhere, family to take you in." Clara almost laughed. Family. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. "No, sir, I don't have anyone." The deputy sighed. "Then you best move on. Sheriff don't like vagrants cluttering up Main Street." Clara forced herself to stand. Her vision went gray at the edges, but she stayed upright. She would not fall again. Not in front of these people who looked at her like she was something scraped off their boots. "Can you tell me," she said carefully, "if anyone in town needs a cook, I can prepare anything. Biscuits, stews, roasts. I worked at my family's inn back in Missouri for 15 years. The deputy scratched his chin. "Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house might need help. Yellow building on Oak Street." "Thank you." Clara walked toward Oak Street with her back straight and her head high. She didn't let herself limp, even though every step sent pain shooting through her blistered feet. She didn't let herself cry, even though tears burned behind her eyes. The boarding house was easy to find. Clara smoothed her hair, straightened her filthy dress, and knocked. A heavy-set woman opened the door. Her eyes traveled from Clara's dusty boots to her sunburned face, and her expression hardened. "Whatever you're selling, I don't want it." "I'm not selling anything, ma'am. I'm looking for work. I heard you might need a cook." "A cook?" The woman laughed. "Looking like that, I run a respectable establishment. My boarders don't want to see some raggedy stranger handling their food. I can clean up, if you just give me a chance. I don't give chances to women who can't even keep themselves decent." The woman started closing the door. "Try the saloon. They ain't picky about who they hire." The door shut with a final click. Clara stood there for a long moment staring at the painted wood. Then she turned and walked back toward Main Street. The saloon. That's what she'd become in people's eyes. A woman desperate enough for saloon work. The kind of work that meant more than serving drinks. No. Clara's stomach clenched. She would starve first. Cake. By late afternoon, Clara had knocked on every door that might offer honest work. The general store didn't need help. The restaurant had a full staff. The hotel employed only local girls with references. The church kitchen was run by volunteers who didn't want strangers. Each rejection cut deeper than the last. She found herself standing in the middle of the plaza, watching the townspeople go about their lives. Women in clean dresses carrying baskets. Men tipping their hats to each other. Children laughing and running. None of them saw her. Or if they did, they looked away. Clara's hand went to the small bundle she carried, everything she owned in the world. Inside was a blackened cast-iron skillet that had belonged to her grandmother, a cloth bag of dried herbs and spices, and a worn leather notebook filled with her mother's recipes. The creditors had taken everything else: the house, the furniture, the quilts her mother had stitched, the silver hairbrush that was her only wedding gift, even the simple gold ring on her finger. But they hadn't wanted these things. Kitchen items, they'd called them. Worthless. They were wrong. Clara walked to the edge of the plaza, where a stone water trough sat in the shade of an old cottonwood tree. She knelt beside it and looked at her reflection in the murky water. A stranger stared back at her, gaunt cheeks, cracked lips, hair that hadn't been properly washed in weeks. This wasn't Clara June Brennan, the woman who had run a busy kitchen and fed travelers from 3 states. This was someone else. Someone broken. "No," Clara whispered to her reflection. "Not broken. Bent. There's a difference." She cupped water in her hands and drank deeply. Then she splashed her face, trying to wash away some of the dust and despair. "That's drinking water for horses, you know." Clara turned. An elderly man stood nearby, leaning on a walking stick. His white hair stuck out from under a battered hat, and his face was weathered like old leather. But his eyes were kind. "I'm sorry," Clara said, standing quickly. "I didn't mean to." "Calm down, girl. I ain't gonna report you to the sheriff." He studied her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look like you haven't eaten in a while." Clara's pride wanted her to deny it, but she was too tired for pride. 3 days, she admitted. Maybe 4. I've lost count. The old man nodded slowly. "Where you from?" "Missouri. My husband had a farm outside of Clayton." "Had..." Clara's throat tightened. "He passed. Fever took him last summer. His family, they didn't want me to stay." That was the simple version. The true version was uglier. Samuel's mother had never liked her. When Samuel died, the old woman saw her chance. She found debts Clara didn't know existed, produced papers Clara had never seen. Within a month, Clara was out on the road with nothing but the clothes on her back and the few things she could carry. The old man was quiet for a moment. "What's your name?" "Clara. Clara June Brennan." "Well, Clara June Brennan, I'm Eli Murphy." He gestured toward the plaza with his stick. "I've been watching you knock on doors all day. You got grit, I'll give you that. Most folks would have given up after the first 3. I can't afford to give up." "What kind of work you looking for?" "Cooking. It's what I know. It's what I'm good at." Clara paused. "It's the only thing I have left." Eli rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You any good at it?" "Real good, I mean. Not just passable." Something sparked in Clara's chest, not quite hope, but close. "My mother ran the finest inn in Clayton County. She taught me everything. Biscuits so light they melt on your tongue. Stews that make grown men weep. I can stretch a handful of beans into a feast and make plain meat taste like something from a fancy restaurant." Clara's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I'm not just good, sir. I'm the best cook most people will ever meet." Eli smiled, revealing gaps where teeth should be. "That's mighty confident talk for a woman drinking from a horse trough." "It's not confidence. It's the truth." The old man studied her for another long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Here, eat this." Clara unwrapped it to find cornbread slightly stale but still good. Her hands shook as she raised it to her mouth. "Slowly," Eli warned. "You eat too fast after starving. You'll just bring it back up." Clara forced herself to take small bites, though her body screamed at her to devour it all at once. The cornbread was plain, but it tasted like heaven. "Thank you," she said between bites. "I'll pay you back somehow, I promise. Don't need payment." Eli lowered himself onto the edge of the water trough with a grunt. "What I need is to see if you're really as good as you claim." Clara paused mid-bite. "What do you mean?" "I know a place that needs a cook. Big spread about 15 miles from here. Garrett's Creek Ranch, runs about 60 head of cattle, and employs 19 hands who need 3 meals a day." Clara's heart began to beat faster. "They need a cook." "They've needed one for months. The boss is particular. Had 6 cooks in the last 2 years. None of them lasted more than a few weeks. Eli shook his head. Thomas Wade Garrett is the hardest man I've ever known. Lost his wife 5 years back and he ain't been the same since. Runs that ranch like he's trying to outwork his own grief. Drives himself and everyone around him harder than any man should. But he needs a cook. He does. Question is, are you tough enough to handle him? Clara finished the cornbread and carefully folded the cloth. Mr. Murphy, I've buried a husband, been thrown out of my home by people who were supposed to be family, walked for 2 weeks with nothing but what I could carry, and knocked on every door in this town while people treated me like dirt. I'm not afraid of a hard man. Eli laughed a real laugh that crinkled his whole face. I believe you might actually mean that. I do. Well then. He pushed himself up from the trough. I can't promise he'll hire you. Thomas doesn't take to strangers, especially women. But I've known him since he was a boy, worked for his daddy before him. He trusts my judgment, even if he doesn't trust much else. Eli pointed his stick toward the mountains in the distance. Follow the main trail out of town. When you hit the fork, go left. Keep walking until you see the ranch spread out in the valley below. Tell them Eli Murphy sent you. Clara stood her legs steadier now with food in her belly. Why are you helping me? You don't know anything about me. Eli's eyes softened. I know enough. I know what it looks like when someone's been knocked down so many times they're not sure they can get back up. And I know what it looks like when they get up anyway. He tapped his stick against the ground. Besides, I've been eating at that ranch for 30 years. If there's a chance you can cook half as good as you claim, I'm doing myself a favor. Clara almost smiled. Almost. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I won't forget this. Just make sure your cooking lives up to your talk. That's all the thanks I need. Clara left Silverton as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. She walked through the evening, her feet screaming with every step, her body exhausted, but her mind focused on one thought. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance. The trail wound through scrubland dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. Jackrabbits darted across her path. Hawks circled overhead. The air smelled of dust and summer heat, and something else, something green and growing that she couldn't quite name. She walked through the night, stopping only to rest her feet and drink from a creek she passed. When dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, she reached the fork Eli had mentioned. Left. She went left. 2 more hours of walking and then she saw it. The ranch spread across the valley like something from a painting. Green pastures dotted with brown and white cattle. Sturdy wooden fences stretching as far as she could see. Barns and outbuildings clustered around a large log house that sat on a slight rise overlooking everything. Clara stopped at the ridgetop and stared. This place could save her. Or it could be just another closed door. She straightened her filthy dress, pushed her hair back from her face, lifted her chin. Then she started walking down. The gates of Garrett's Creek Ranch were open, but that didn't mean Clara was welcome. 3 men stopped their work to stare as she approached. Their faces showed suspicion, curiosity, and something close to pity. "Who are you?" called a bearded man with arms like tree trunks. "What do you want here?" Clara didn't let herself hesitate. "I'm looking for work. I heard you need a cook." The men exchanged glances. The bearded one, Buck, she would later learn, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I don't know where you heard that, but the boss ain't gonna want—" "Let me talk to him." Buck blinked. "Excuse me?" "Let me talk to your boss. If he doesn't want to hire me, that's his choice. But I walked 15 miles to get here, and I'm not leaving without at least speaking to the man." Another exchange of glances. Buck almost smiled. "You got backbone, I'll give you that." He tilted his head toward the big house. "Come on then, but don't say I didn't warn you." They walked toward the house in silence. Clara felt eyes on her from every direction, men pausing their work to watch faces appearing in barn doorways. She kept her head high and her steps steady. Buck led her to the front porch of the main house and told her to wait. He disappeared inside. Clara stood there for what felt like forever. Her heart pounded so hard, she could feel it in her throat. Her hands trembled so she clasped them together to hide it. The door opened. Thomas Wade Garrett stepped onto the porch and Clara felt the air leave her lungs. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and strong arms that strained against his work shirt. His dark hair was peppered with gray at the temples and lines around his eyes spoke of years spent squinting into the sun. But it was his face that struck her most. Hard, closed, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with physical burdens. His eyes were dark and penetrating, and when they settled on Clara, she felt like he was looking straight through her to something underneath, something she tried to keep hidden. "You the one looking for work?" His voice was low and rough, like gravel under wagon wheels. Clara met his gaze. "Yes, sir. I heard you need a cook." "Where'd you hear that?" "Eli Murphy sent me." Something flickered across Thomas's face. Not quite surprise, but close. "Eli, huh?" He crossed his arms over his chest. "You got any experience?" 15 years. I ran the kitchen at my family's inn back in Missouri. Fed travelers from 3 states. Biscuits, stews, roasts, pies, breads, anything you need, I can make it. Lots of women have said the same. Thomas's voice held no warmth. 6 cooks in 2 years. None of them could handle the work. I'm not them. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That's so. Yes, sir. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid of long hours. And I'm not afraid of you. Clara surprised herself with those last words, but she didn't take them back. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove what I can do. For a long moment, Thomas just stared at her. Clara felt herself being measured, weighed, judged. She held her ground and didn't look away. Finally, Thomas spoke. 1 week. Clara's heart leaped. 7 days to prove you can cook as good as you claim. Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon. Supper at 6. 19 men plus me. You impress me, you stay. You don't. He shrugged. You leave. I understand. Don't think I'll go easy on you because you're a woman. I expect the same from everyone who works here, and I don't tolerate excuses. I don't make excuses, sir. Another long stare. Then Thomas turned toward the door. Buck will show you to your room and the kitchen. I expect breakfast on the table at 6 sharp tomorrow. He disappeared inside without another word. Clara stood there, her legs shaking so badly she thought she might collapse. But she didn't. She stayed upright, stayed strong, stayed standing. Buck appeared beside her. Well, I'll be damned. He actually gave you a chance. Is that unusual? Ma'am, the last woman who came looking for work he sent away before she finished her first sentence. Buck shook his head slowly. Whatever you said, it worked. Clara didn't know what she'd said that was different. Maybe nothing. Maybe it was just luck, the first good luck she'd had in months. Or maybe it was something else. The way Thomas had looked at her at the end. Like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. Come on, Buck said. Let me show you where you'll be sleeping. The room was small. A narrow bed with a thin mattress. A wooden table with a crooked leg. A window that stuck when Clara tried to open it. A single chair. A small mirror on the wall. To Clara, it looked like a palace. Kitchen's down the hall, Buck said from the doorway. Pantry's fully stocked. Men eat in the dining room, big table, can't miss it. He paused. You need anything before I go? Clara shook her head. Just some water to clean up, and maybe a needle and thread. My dress? She gestured at the torn fabric. I'll see what I can find. After Buck left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe. Really breathe for the first time in weeks. She had a room. She had a chance. She had 7 days. 7 days to prove that she was worth something. 7 days to show Thomas Wade Garrett and everyone else that Clara June Brennan was more than a desperate widow begging for scraps. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror. The same gaunt face stared back at her, but something was different now. A spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. 7 days, she said to herself. You can do anything for 7 days. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, planning every detail of tomorrow's breakfast. She had explored the kitchen before dark, a large, well-equipped space with good knives, heavy pots, and a stove that looked like it had seen better days, but still worked. The pantry held flour, sugar, salt, dried meat, fresh eggs, milk, butter, vegetables, and basic spices. Not fancy ingredients, but Clara didn't need fancy. She needed skill and care and attention, things she had in abundance. Her mind raced through recipes. Biscuits light and fluffy with crispy edges. Eggs scrambled with butter and a touch of milk, maybe some sage from her own supplies. Bacon cooked until it was crispy, but not burnt. Strong coffee to wash it all down. And something special for the boss. Something that would show him what she could really do. Clara finally drifted off as the first gray light of dawn touched her window. She woke with a start, heart pounding. The clock on the wall said 5, 1 hour until breakfast. Clara threw off the thin blanket and got to work. 10. By the time the first ranch hands appeared in the dining room, the table was set and the food was ready. Biscuits, golden brown and still steaming, piled high in a basket. Scrambled eggs fluffy and seasoned with herbs from Clara's personal supply. Thick slices of bacon perfectly cooked. A pot of strong coffee that filled the room with its rich aroma. Fresh butter she had churned herself in the early morning hours. Honey from the pantry drizzled into a small bowl. The men stopped in the doorway and stared. "Morning," Clara said, her voice steady. "Please sit down." They filed in slowly, exchanging confused glances. Buck took his seat at the head of the table, watching Clara with something like amusement. "Smells good," said a young cowhand with sandy hair. "It'll taste better," Clara replied. "Help yourselves." The first man to take a biscuit was Buck. He broke it open, revealing the soft layered interior, and took a bite. His eyes went wide. "Good Lord," he breathed. "This is—" He did not finish the sentence. He was too busy taking another bite. The other men didn't need more encouragement. Hands reached for biscuits, spooned eggs onto plates, grabbed strips of bacon. The sounds of chewing filled the room, and then slowly other sounds. Murmurs of appreciation, soft groans of pleasure. Words like incredible and amazing and where has this woman been all my life? Clara stood by the kitchen doorway watching. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her face calm. "These biscuits," said an older man with a weathered face. "Ma'am, these are the best biscuits I've had since my mother passed." "The eggs," added another. "What did you put in these eggs? They taste like clouds." "Just butter and herbs," Clara said, "and a little care." Buck wiped his mouth with his napkin and looked at her with something close to wonder. "The boss is gonna want to try this." "I made him a separate tray," Clara said. "I wasn't sure if he eats with the men." "He doesn't. Takes his meals in his study." Buck stood. "I'll bring it to him." Clara had prepared Thomas's tray with extra attention. The best biscuits, the most perfectly cooked bacon eggs, arranged just so. She'd added something special, a small pot of gravy she'd made from the bacon drippings, seasoned with pepper and a touch of thyme. Buck carried the tray away. The men continued eating, their conversation growing livelier with each bite. Clara heard laughter for the first time, real laughter, the kind that came from satisfied bellies and lifted spirits. She allowed herself a small smile. But the real test hadn't come yet. In his study, Thomas Wade Garrett frowned at the papers on his desk. Cattle prices were dropping. 2 fences needed repair. One of his best horses had gone lame. Buck knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "Breakfast." He set the tray on the corner of the desk. Thomas didn't look up. "Leave it there." "You should eat it while it's hot, boss." "I'll eat when I'm ready." Buck lingered in the doorway longer than usual. Thomas finally looked up. "Something else." "Just Buck shook his head, a strange smile on his face. Nothing. Enjoy your breakfast. He left, closing the door behind him. Thomas went back to his papers. But the aroma from the tray slowly filled the room, butter and bacon, and something else he couldn't quite name. Something that made his stomach growl and his mouth water. Almost against his will, he reached for a biscuit. The first bite stopped him cold. The biscuit was perfect, crispy on the outside, soft and layered within, rich with butter and salt. Thomas had eaten thousands of biscuits in his life, but none quite like this. He took another bite, then another. He tried the eggs, fluffy, savory, seasoned with herbs that danced on his tongue. The bacon was crispy without being burnt. And the gravy. Lord, the gravy. Rich and peppery, it transformed everything it touched. Thomas finished the entire tray without stopping. When he was done, he sat back in his chair and stared at the empty plates. That woman, the one with the torn dress and the defiant eyes, she could cook. Really cook. Better than anyone who had worked in this kitchen in years. Maybe better than Mary Ellen. Thomas pushed that thought away quickly. He didn't want to think about Mary Ellen. Not now, not ever. But as he turned back to his papers, he found he couldn't quite focus. His mind kept drifting to the kitchen, to the woman with the tired face and the steady voice. "I'm not afraid of you," she had said. No one talked to him like that. Not anymore. Thomas picked up his pen and tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Clara woke before dawn. She cooked breakfast, always something slightly different, always perfectly executed. She watched the men eat, memorizing their preferences. Jake liked extra bacon. Henry took his coffee with sugar. Old Pete couldn't handle too much pepper. She learned their names, their stories, their habits. She asked about their families, their homes, their dreams, and slowly, cautiously, they began to trust her. "You're different from the others," Buck told her on the third day. "How so?" "The other cooks, they treated this like a job. Cook the food, collect the pay, go home." Buck shook his head. You actually care. About the food. About the men. About doing things right." Clara considered this. "When I cook for someone, I'm not just feeding their body. I'm feeding something else. Something deeper." She smiled slightly. "My mother used to say you can taste love in a meal. The care, the attention. It comes through in every bite." Buck nodded slowly. "I believe that. I really do, Ange." Every day, Clara prepared a special tray for Thomas, and every day the tray came back empty, but he never said a word to her. She glimpsed him sometimes crossing the yard, talking to Buck, riding out to check the fences. He was always working, always moving, always busy. And whenever his eyes happened to meet hers, he looked away quickly, his face unreadable. Clara didn't let it discourage her. She had 7 days to prove herself. As long as Thomas kept eating what she cooked, she had a chance. On the 5th morning, something changed. Clara was preparing dinner, a beef stew that had been simmering since dawn, when she heard voices outside the kitchen. Male voices, young and crude, punctuated by ugly laughter. "Swear the way she bends over that stove. I'd like to see what's under that apron. Maybe she'd cook me a private supper, if you know what I mean." Clara's hands tightened on the wooden spoon. She recognized those voices. Jimmy Cole and his friends, 3 young ranch hands who had been watching her with hungry eyes since she arrived. She had tried to ignore them, tried to brush off their stares, their comments, their accidental touches when they passed her in the hallway. She couldn't afford trouble. Not now. Not when she was so close to proving herself. But this was different. This was deliberate. This was them standing right outside her kitchen, making sure she could hear every disgusting word. "Hey, Clara." Jimmy's voice was louder, now clearly meant for her. "Why don't you come out here and bring us some of that pie? We promise to show our appreciation." More laughter. Something dark and ugly twisted in Clara's stomach. She set down the spoon, wiped her hands on her apron, walked to the kitchen door. Jimmy Cole leaned against the porch railing, flanked by two of his friends. He was handsome in a boyish way. Sandy hair, easy smile, the kind of face that got away with too much. When he saw Clara, his grin widened. There she is, our beautiful cook. Gentlemen, Clara's voice was ice. Is there something you need? Just enjoying the view. Jimmy's eyes traveled slowly down her body. Nothing wrong with that, is there? Dinner will be ready at noon. Until then, I suggest you find somewhere else to stand. Oh, she's feisty. Jimmy pushed off from the railing and took a step toward her. I like feisty. Walk away, Mr. Cole. Or what? Another step. He was close enough now that Clara could smell tobacco on his breath. What are you gonna do, sweetheart? Hit me with your cooking spoon. Clara didn't back down. She met his eyes and held them. No, I'm going to do my job, which is cooking for the men of this ranch, not entertaining boys who think they're men because they can make crude jokes. She paused. Now step back before I forget I'm a lady. Jimmy's smile flickered. For a moment, something dangerous passed behind his eyes. Then, a voice cut through the air like a whip. Cole! Everyone froze. Thomas Wade Garrett stood at the corner of the house, his face a mask of cold fury. Clara didn't know how long he'd been there or how much he'd heard, but the look in his eyes said it was enough. Boss? Jimmy started. Shut your mouth. Thomas walked toward them with slow, deliberate steps. Each footfall seemed to echo in the sudden silence. All three of you, in the barn, now. The boys didn't argue. They practically ran, their bravado evaporating like morning dew. Thomas watched them go. Then he turned to Clara. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. Clara saw something in his face that she hadn't expected, not just anger at the boys, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like pain. You all right? His voice was gruff, almost reluctant. I'm fine. They won't bother you again. I could have handled it. I know. Thomas paused. But you shouldn't have to. He turned and walked toward the barn, his boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. Clara watched him go, her heart beating faster than it should. That night she put extra care into his supper tray. His favorite roast cooked just how she'd learned he liked it. Golden potatoes, fresh bread still warm, and a small slice of apple pie, the first she'd made since arriving. When Buck returned the tray, he was smiling. Boss finished everything, even the pie. He shook his head in disbelief. I've never seen him eat dessert, not in 5 years. Clara smiled, and for the first time since coming to this place, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found somewhere she belonged. The week passed faster than Clara expected. 6 days of cooking. 6 days of watching the ranch hands transform from suspicious strangers into something close to friends. 6 days of empty trays returning from Thomas's study without a single word of feedback. And now it was the 7th morning. Clara stood in the kitchen before dawn, her hands trembling as she measured flour. Today would decide everything. Either Thomas would let her stay, or she would be back on the road with nothing. You're up early. Clara spun around. Thomas stood in the kitchen doorway, his face half hidden in shadow. She had never seen him in the kitchen before. Not once in 7 days. Mr. Garrett? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I didn't hear you come in. Couldn't sleep. He stepped into the room, and Clara noticed dark circles under his eyes. Figured I'd get some coffee. I haven't made it yet. Give me 5 minutes. Don't rush on my account. He pulled out a chair and sat at the small table where Clara took her own meals. She tried to focus on measuring coffee grounds, but his presence filled the room like a physical weight. The men like your cooking, Thomas said suddenly. Clara's hands paused. I'm glad to hear it. Buck says morale is higher than it's been in years. Says the boys are actually looking forward to meals instead of dreading them. Food matters. Most people don't realize how much. Thomas was quiet for a moment. My wife used to say that. Clara turned to look at him. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife to her directly. His face was turned toward the window where the first gray light of dawn was creeping in. "She was a good cook?" Clara asked carefully. "The best I ever knew." Thomas's voice was rough. "She could make anything taste like heaven. Even when we had nothing, she made it feel like a feast." Clara didn't know what to say. She turned back to the coffee and let the silence stretch. "You remind me of her," Thomas said quietly. "The way you cook, the way you care about it. She was the same way." Clara's heart stuttered. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Garrett. It was 5 years ago. People say time heals. They're liars." The coffee began to boil. Clara poured a cup and brought it to him. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and something electric passed between them. Thomas looked up at her, and for a moment his guard dropped completely. Clara saw the pain underneath raw and fresh, as if his wife had died yesterday instead of 5 years ago. "You can stay," he said. Clara blinked. "What?" "The job. It's yours. Permanently." Thomas took a long drink of coffee. "If you want it." Relief flooded through Clara so intensely that her knees almost buckled. "Yes. Yes, I want it." "Good." Thomas stood abruptly as if embarrassed by his own vulnerability. "Tell Buck to add you to the payroll. Room and board plus $15 a month." "Thank you, Mr. Garrett. I won't let you down." He paused at the doorway and looked back at her. "Thomas." "I'm sorry." "Call me Thomas. Mr. Garrett was my father." Before Clara could respond, he was gone. She stood there in the empty kitchen, her heart pounding, a smile spreading across her face. She had done it. She had actually done it. The sun rose over Garrett's Creek Ranch, and for the first time in months, Clara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days that followed brought a new rhythm to Clara's life. She woke before dawn, cooked 3 meals a day, and fell into bed each night exhausted but content. The work was hard, but it was honest work. Work that mattered. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. Thomas started appearing in the kitchen more often, always with an excuse, checking the firewood, looking for a tool he'd misplaced, asking about supplies. But Clara noticed how his eyes would find hers across the room, how he would linger longer than necessary, how his voice softened when he spoke to her. "You fixed the table," Clara said one evening, running her hand over the smooth surface. Thomas shrugged. "Leg was crooked. Bothered me." "And the window. It opens now." "Stuck from humidity. Simple fix." Clara smiled. "Thank you." Thomas's face reddened slightly. "Just maintaining the property. Nothing special." But they both knew it was more than that. 2 weeks after Clara's permanent hiring, Martha Finch came to visit. The kind woman from Silverton had heard about Clara's position and rode 15 miles to see her. "Look at you," Martha said, pulling Clara into a hug. "You look like a different person." "I feel like one." They sat on the back porch drinking lemonade Clara had made that morning. Martha caught her up on town gossip, who had married, who had moved away, whose business had failed. "And the deputy?" Clara asked. "The one who told me to move along." Martha laughed. "Got himself transferred to Denver. Good riddance." Her expression grew serious. "I heard about the trouble with those young men. The coal boy and his friends." Clara stiffened. "How did you hear about that? Word travels. Small territory." Martha leaned closer. "I also heard Thomas Garrett himself put a stop to it." "That true?" "He did." "Interesting." Martha's eyes sparkled with something knowing. "Thomas Garrett hasn't stuck his neck out for anyone in 5 years, not since Mary Ellen passed." Clara looked away. "He was just protecting his investment. A cook is hard to find." "Is that what you think?" "That's what it is." Martha was quiet for a moment. "You know how she died, Mary Ellen." Clara shook her head. "Flash flood. Summer storm 5 years back. Water came down from the mountain so fast nobody had time to react. Mary Ellen was in the barn when it hit. Thomas was out checking fences. He rode back as fast as he could, but Martha's voice trailed off. They say he could hear her calling for him. He tried to get to her, but the water was too strong. He watched her drown. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, God. He hasn't been the same since. Closed himself off from everyone and everything. Works himself half to death. Won't let anyone get close. Martha reached over and squeezed Clara's hand. Until now. Martha, I'm just the cook. Honey, you're a lot more than that. Anyone with eyes can see it. Martha stood and brushed off her skirt. Just be patient with him. He's been running from his grief for 5 years. It's going to take time for him to stop. After Martha left, Clara sat alone on the porch, thinking about what she'd learned. Thomas's coldness, his distance, his inability to connect it all made sense now. He wasn't just a hard man. He was a broken one. And broken things, Clara knew from experience, could still be mended. The summer heat intensified as July turned toward August. Clara adjusted her cooking to match lighter meals, more cold dishes, plenty of water and lemonade for the men working in the fields. Thomas began taking his meals in the dining room with the hands. He claimed it was more efficient, but Clara noticed he always chose the seat with the clearest view of the kitchen door. You should sit, he told her one evening. Eat with us. Clara looked up from the pot she was stirring. I eat in the kitchen. That's not what I asked. The men at the table had gone quiet, watching the exchange with barely concealed interest. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I have work to do. The work can wait. Thomas pulled out the chair beside him. Sit. It wasn't a request. Clara wiped her hands and took the offered seat. The meal that followed was awkward at first. Clara wasn't used to eating while being watched, and the men seemed unsure how to act with her among them. But gradually the tension eased. Buck cracked a joke. One of the younger hands told a story about a runaway horse. Soon the table was filled with laughter and conversation. Clara caught Thomas watching her, a ghost of a smile on his lips. What? She asked. Nothing. He looked away. It's been a long time since this table sounded like this. That night, Clara lay awake in her narrow bed staring at the ceiling. Something was changing between her and Thomas. Something she didn't have words for yet. Something that scared her and thrilled her in equal measure. She thought about Samuel, her dead husband. She had loved him, or thought she had. But their marriage had been practical, arranged by their families when she was barely 18. Samuel had been kind enough, but distant. More interested in his farm than in her. Thomas was different. When he looked at her, Clara felt seen in a way she never had before. Like he could read her thoughts. Like he understood her without needing explanations. It terrified her. Clara rolled onto her side and closed her eyes. She couldn't afford to think like this. Thomas was her employer. She was his cook. That's all this was. That's all it could be. But her heart didn't believe it. The trouble came 3 weeks later. Clara was washing dishes after breakfast when she heard shouting from the yard. She dried her hands and stepped onto the porch. A group of men on horseback had gathered near the main gate. They weren't ranch hands. Their clothes were too fine, their horses too sleek. At their head sat a man in a black suit, his face twisted with contempt. Thomas stood facing them, his stance rigid. I told you last month, Prescott. The answer is no. The man in the black suit, Prescott, smiled coldly. And I told you, Garrett, that I always get what I want. This land is sitting on the best water rights in the territory. You can sell to me willingly, or I can make your life very difficult. Try it. I already have. Prescott gestured toward the mountains. Remember that fence line that keeps falling down, the cattle that went missing last spring? The suppliers who suddenly won't do business with you. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. You son of a... Careful now. Prescott held up a hand. I'm trying to be civil. Take my offer. 50 cents on the dollar for the whole spread. You can walk away with something instead of nothing. This land belonged to my grandfather. My father built this ranch from nothing. I watched my wife die on this property." Thomas's voice shook with controlled rage. "I will burn it to the ground before I let a snake like you take it." Prescott's smile vanished. "Have it your way. But remember this conversation when things start going wrong." He wheeled his horse around. "Enjoy your summer, Garrett. It's going to be your last one here." The riders galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Clara walked toward Thomas, her heart pounding. "Who was that?" Thomas didn't look at her. His eyes were still fixed on the disappearing horseman. "Victor Prescott. Owns half the territory and wants the other half. He's been trying to buy this ranch for 3 years. And you won't sell?" "Never." Thomas finally turned to face her. His expression was dark, dangerous. "This is my home. My heritage. Everything I have left of the people I loved. I don't care how much money he offers or what tricks he plays. I will die before I give it up." Clara understood. She knew what it meant to lose everything, to have nothing left but memories and determination. "What will you do?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Whatever I have to." He walked away toward the barn, his shoulders carrying a weight Clara wished she could help lift. That night, Clara dreamed of water. She was standing in a barn, water rising around her ankles. She could hear someone calling her name, but the voice was muffled far away. The water rose higher to her knees, her waist, her chest. She tried to move, but her feet were stuck in the mud. "Clara! Clara!" She woke with a gasp, her heart racing. Rain pounded against the window. Thunder rolled across the sky. Another summer storm. Clara threw off her blankets and ran to the window. Lightning illuminated the yard, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The river was rising. She pulled on her dress and boots, not bothering with proper fastening. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Buck. "The river's flooding," he said, his face pale. "Boss is already out there with the men." Clara ran into the storm. The yard was chaos. Men shouted and ran in every direction. Horses screamed in the stable. The river, normally a gentle ribbon of water, had become a roaring monster, swallowing everything in its path. Clara spotted Thomas standing at the edge of the flood, staring at the water with an expression she had never seen before. Pure terror. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. His body was rigid, trembling. He was somewhere else, not here, not now. He was 5 years in the past, watching his wife drown. "Thomas!" Buck grabbed his arm. "Boss, we need to move the cattle. The lower pasture is flooding." Thomas didn't respond, didn't move, didn't blink. "He's gone," Buck said desperately. "He does this sometimes when there's water, just freezes up. I don't know how to—" "Move!" Clara pushed past him. She walked straight up to Thomas and grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. "Thomas! Thomas, listen to me. You are not there. You are here, right now, with me. Do you understand?" His eyes were wild, unfocused. His breath came in ragged gasps. "She's gone," he whispered. "I couldn't save her. I couldn't. I know, and I'm sorry. But right now, your men need you. Your ranch needs you." Clara's voice was fierce, urgent. "You can fall apart later. Right now you need to lead. Can you do that? Can you do that for me?" Something shifted in Thomas's eyes. The past loosened its grip just a little. He focused on Clara's face, like it was the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. "Clara, I'm here. I'm right here." He took a shuddering breath, then another. His hands came up to cover hers. "The cattle," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "We need to move them to higher ground." "Yes. Tell your men what to do." Thomas straightened, his jaw set. The terror was still there. Clara could see it lurking behind his eyes, but he pushed it down, locked it away. "Buck!" His voice rang out across the yard. "Get every man mounted. We're moving the herd to the north pasture. Now." Buck stared for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Yes, sir." Clara stepped back as Thomas transformed before her eyes. The broken man was gone, replaced by the leader these men needed. He barked orders, organized the chaos, directed the rescue effort with calm precision. But he kept Clara in his sight the whole time, and every few minutes his eyes would find hers across the flooded yard, anchoring himself to her presence. The storm raged for hours. Clara worked alongside the men moving equipment to higher ground, herding panicked horses, doing whatever needed to be done. Her dress was soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. But she didn't stop. None of them did. By dawn, the worst was over. The river began to recede. The rain slowed to a drizzle, then stopped altogether. Clara stood in the muddy yard surveying the damage. The lower pasture was destroyed. One barn had collapsed. Fences were down everywhere. But the cattle were safe. The horses were safe. Most importantly, everyone was alive. "Clara." She turned. Thomas stood behind her, covered in mud from head to toe. His face was exhausted, but his eyes were clear. "Thank you," he said, "for what you did back there, for bringing me back." Clara shook her head. "You did the work. I just reminded you who you are." Thomas stepped closer. Close enough that Clara could see the pulse beating in his throat. "How did you know what to say? How did you know how to reach me?" "Because I know what it's like to be trapped in the past, to have your worst memories play over and over until they feel more real than the present." Clara met his gaze. "I know what it's like to think you'll never escape." "But you did. You escaped." "I'm still escaping. Every day." Clara smiled sadly. "Some wounds don't heal, Thomas. They just become part of who you are. The trick is learning to carry them without letting them crush you." Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and brushed a strand of wet hair from Clara's face. His touch was gentle, hesitant, like he was handling something precious and fragile. "I don't deserve this," he said quietly. "Someone like you, after everything I've done wrong." "What have you done wrong?" "I let her die. I wasn't there when she needed me. I've spent 5 years punishing myself and everyone around me for something I can never fix." Clara caught his hand and held it. "You couldn't have saved her, Thomas. The flood came too fast. You would have died trying." "Maybe I should have." "No." Clara's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare say that. Your wife loved you. She would want you to live, to be happy, to find peace." Thomas's eyes glistened. "I don't know how anymore. I forgot." Clara squeezed his hand. "Then let me remind you, the way you reminded me that I was worth something when no one else would give me a chance." They stood there, in the gray morning light, two broken people holding on to each other. Not speaking, not moving, just breathing together. And somewhere in that silence, something shifted. Something that had been closed for 5 long years, cracked open just a little. Just enough to let the light in. The days after the flood brought something Clara hadn't expected. Tenderness. Thomas didn't speak about what happened between them in the yard. Neither did Clara. But everything was different now. The walls he'd built so carefully over 5 years had cracked, and through those cracks she could see the man underneath. He started finding reasons to be near her, helping carry water from the well, fixing things in the kitchen that weren't broken, asking her opinion on ranch matters that had nothing to do with cooking. "What do you think about buying more cattle?" he asked one morning, standing in the kitchen doorway while Clara kneaded bread. "I think you should ask Buck. He knows more about cattle than I do." "I'm asking you." Clara looked up. Thomas was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I think," she said slowly, "that you should do whatever feels right. You know this land better than anyone." Thomas nodded. "And if what feels right scares me?" They weren't talking about cattle anymore. Clara knew it. He knew it. "Then maybe that's exactly why you should do it." Thomas held her gaze for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. But that night, Clara found a wildflower on her pillow. Just one. A small purple bloom that grew on the hillside behind the ranch. She pressed it between the pages of her mother's recipe book and smiled until her cheeks hurt. 2 weeks passed. The ranch recovered from the flood. Fences were rebuilt, the damaged barn cleared away. Life returned to its rhythm, but with a new undercurrent. Everyone could feel something shifting between Thomas and Clara. The men exchanged knowing looks. Buck started whistling when he saw them talking. "You're good for him," Eli Murphy said one afternoon. The old man had ridden out from town to check on the ranch after hearing about the flood. Clara handed him a cup of coffee. "I'm just doing my job." "Girl, don't insult my intelligence." Eli's eyes twinkled. "I've known Thomas since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even Mary Ellen, God rest her soul." Clara's hands trembled slightly. He loved Mary Ellen. He did, but love comes in different forms. What he had with her was young love, hot and fast. What he's building with you? Eli shook his head. That's something deeper, something that could last. Nothing has happened between us. Yet. Eli grinned. Give it time. That man's been running from his heart for 5 years. But he's tired of running. I can see it in his eyes. Clara didn't know how to respond. So she just poured more coffee and changed the subject. But Eli's words stayed with her long after he left. The trouble started again on a Tuesday. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw the riders approaching. 3 men moving fast. She recognized them immediately. Prescott's men. "Thomas," she called. He emerged from the barn, saw the riders, and his face went hard. "Get inside," he told Clara. "I'm not. Please." His voice was quiet, but urgent. "Just this once, don't argue with me." Something in his eyes made Clara obey. She retreated to the porch but didn't go inside. She wasn't going to hide like a scared child. The riders stopped at the gate. The leader, a big man with a scar across his cheek, spat in the dirt. "Garrett, Mr. Prescott sends his regards. Get off my land. We're just delivering a message." The man smiled, showing yellow teeth. "Mr. Prescott's patience is running out. He's made you a fair offer, more than fair. But you keep spitting in his face." Thomas's hand rested on the gun at his hip. "The answer's still no." "That's unfortunate." The scarred man looked around the ranch, his eyes landing briefly on Clara. "Real unfortunate. Things have a way of going wrong when Mr. Prescott's unhappy. Accidents happen. People get hurt." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." The man wheeled his horse around. "Think about it, Garrett. Think about what you have to lose." They rode away, leaving dust and dread in their wake. Thomas stood motionless until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he turned and walked toward Clara, his face pale. "This is getting worse," she said. "I know. Thomas, maybe we should—" "No." His voice was sharp. "I told you. I will not sell. Not to Prescott, not to anyone." "I wasn't going to suggest selling." Clara stepped closer. "I was going to suggest we fight back." Thomas looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You gave me a home when I had nothing. This ranch is my home now, too. If Prescott wants it, he's going to have to go through both of us." Something shifted in Thomas's expression. The hardness melted into something softer, warmer. "Clara, don't argue with me." She smiled slightly. "Just this once." Thomas laughed a real laugh, the first she'd heard from him. It transformed his whole face, made him look years younger. "You're something else, Clara June Brennan." "So I've been told." That night they sat together on the back porch watching the stars come out. Thomas told her stories about his childhood, his father teaching him to ride his mother singing while she cooked the first time he saw Mary Ellen at a church social. She was wearing a blue dress, he said quietly. Prettiest thing I'd ever seen. I was 19 and stupid in love before she even knew my name. How long were you married? 8 years. 8 good years. Thomas was quiet for a moment. We wanted children, but it never happened. Mary Ellen blamed herself. I told her it didn't matter that she was enough. And she was. She really was. Clara reached over and took his hand. He didn't pull away. She sounds wonderful. She was. Thomas turned to look at Clara. But she's gone. And I spent 5 years punishing myself for surviving her. I thought if I just kept working, kept pushing, I could outrun the guilt. But you can't outrun something that lives inside you. No, you can't. You showed me that. His thumb traced circles on her palm. That night in the flood. You reached in and pulled me back from somewhere dark. No one's been able to do that before. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Thomas, Let me finish. He turned to face her fully. I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if I'm ready for it, but I know I don't want you to leave. I know that when I wake up in the morning, you're the first person I want to see. I know that when you smile, something inside me that's been dead for 5 years comes back to life. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I feel the same way. You do, every single day. Thomas raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Then we'll figure the rest out together. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They sat there until the moon rose, hands intertwined, saying nothing and everything at once. The first attack came a week later. Clara woke to shouting and the smell of smoke. She threw on her dress and ran outside. The hay barn was burning. No! She ran toward the flames, but strong arms caught her. Stay back! Thomas pulled her away. It's too late for the barn. We need to save what we can. The men formed a bucket line, but the fire was too hot too fast. Within an hour, the hay barn was nothing but ashes and embers. Thomas stood staring at the destruction, his face grim. Prescott, Clara asked. Who else? He kicked a charred piece of wood. That hay was supposed to last us through winter. Without it. We'll figure something out. Will we? Thomas's voice was bitter. He's not going to stop Clara. He's going to keep coming at us until we break. Then we don't break. Thomas looked at her and some of the despair faded from his eyes. How do you do that? Do what? Make me believe we can survive anything. Clara stepped closer and took his face in her hands. Because we can. As long as we're together, we can survive anything. Thomas pulled her into his arms and held her tight. She could feel his heart beating against her chest, fast and strong. I won't let him hurt you, Thomas whispered into her hair. I promise, Clara. Whatever happens to me, he will not touch you. Clara wanted to argue, to tell him she could protect herself, but she just held him tighter and let herself believe. The second attack was more personal. Clara went to town for supplies 3 days after the fire. She took Buck with her, as Thomas insisted she never travel alone anymore. The general store was crowded when they arrived. Clara felt eyes on her as she moved through the aisles. Whispers followed her. That's her, someone muttered. The woman living at Garrett's ranch. Living in sin, more like. Shameless, and her husband barely cold in the ground. Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. At the counter, the shopkeeper, a man named Harris, set down his newspaper and frowned. Can't help you today. Buck stepped forward. What do you mean you can't help us? We've been buying supplies here for years. That was before. Harris glanced around nervously. Mr. Prescott's made it clear he doesn't want anyone doing business with Garrett's ranch. Since when do you take orders from Prescott? Since he bought the mortgage on my store. Harris's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm sorry, Buck. I really am. But I got a family to feed. I can't risk it. Clara felt her stomach drop. Is there anywhere else we can buy supplies? Harris shook his head. He got to all of them. Every store, every supplier in 50 miles. You're cut off. Buck's face went red with anger. This ain't right. This ain't how things are supposed to work. Right doesn't matter when one man holds all the cards. Harris looked genuinely sorry. Tell Thomas I'm sorry, and tell him to be careful. Prescott's getting impatient. They left the store empty-handed. Clara's mind raced, trying to think of solutions. What do we do now? Buck asked. I don't know, but we'll figure something out. We have to. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Clara couldn't stop thinking about what the women in the store had said. Living in sin. Shameless. Is that what people thought? Is that what she was? No. She knew her own heart. She knew what was between her and Thomas. It wasn't sin. It was healing. Two broken people finding their way back to life. But the words still hurt. Thomas met them at the gate. His face fell when he saw the empty wagon. Harris turned us away, Buck said. Prescott's got the whole territory locked down. Thomas said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara. You're upset. What happened? Clara shook her head. It's nothing. Clara. She couldn't lie to him. People were talking. About us, about me living here. Thomas's expression darkened. What did they say? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Clara sighed. They said I was living in sin, that I was shameless. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He took her hand and led her to the center of the yard where all the ranch hands could see. Everyone listen up. His voice carried across the property. Men stopped their work and gathered around confused. This woman right here, Thomas said, his voice steady and clear, is the finest person I have ever known. She came here with nothing but a skillet and the clothes on her back. She's fed us, cared for us, and saved this ranch more times than I can count. And if anyone has a problem with her being here, they can collect their wages and leave right now. Silence. Then Buck started to clap. One by one, the other men joined in. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Thomas turned to her, his expression soft. I don't care what they say in town. I don't care what anyone thinks. You belong here, Clara. This is your home, and I want everyone to know it. Clara threw her arms around him, not caring who saw. Thomas held her close. I'm going to make this right, he whispered. I'm going to protect you. I promise. Clara believed him. She had to believe him, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. The third attack happened 3 days later. Clara was alone in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard the back door creak open. She turned, expecting Buck or one of the hands. Victor Prescott stood in her kitchen. Clara's blood ran cold. How did you get in here? Your men are busy with a problem in the south pasture. Amazing what a few scared cattle can distract people from. Prescott walked toward her slowly, like a predator stalking prey. We haven't been properly introduced. I'm Victor Prescott. I know who you are. Good. Then you know I'm not a man to be trifled with. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. You're the cook, the one Thomas has gotten so attached to. Clara's hand inched toward the knife on the counter. What do you want? I want you to convince Thomas to sell. He won't listen to reason, but maybe he'll listen to you. I would never do that, Prescott sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. He moved closer, and Clara's back hit the counter. You know I've been watching you, studying you. You're a survivor, Clara. I can see it in your eyes. You do what you have to do to stay alive. Stay away from me. What would you do to protect Thomas, to protect this ranch you've grown so attached to? Prescott smiled, and it was the coldest thing Clara had ever seen. Would you leave? Would you walk away if it meant saving his life? Clara's heart stopped. What are you saying? I'm saying that accidents happen, Clara. Fires start, floods come, men get thrown from horses. Prescott leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. But accidents don't have to happen. Not if Thomas is reasonable. Not if someone he trusts convinces him to take my offer. He will never sell. Then he will lose everything, including you. Prescott's hand shot out and grabbed Clara's wrist. Think about it. You came here with nothing. You could leave with nothing. It would be easy. Just disappear one night and all of this goes away. Let go of me. Or what? Prescott laughed. You'll scream, call for help, your protector is miles away chasing phantom cattle. By the time he gets back, our conversation will be over, and you'll have had plenty of time to think about what I've said. Clara's fingers closed around the knife handle. I said, she hissed, let go of me. She brought the knife up fast, pressing the blade against Prescott's throat. His eyes went wide. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Clara's voice was deadly calm. I've survived things that would break men like you. I've walked through fire and flood and heartbreak. You think I'm afraid of a little blood? For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered in Prescott's eyes. Now, Clara continued, you're going to walk out of my kitchen. You're going to get on your horse. And you're going to ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of. And if you ever come near this ranch again, I will make sure it's the last thing you do. Prescott slowly released her wrist. He stepped back, straightening his jacket. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Prescott stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out the back door. Clara waited until she heard hooves riding away. Then her legs gave out and she collapsed against the counter, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. That's how Thomas found her, an hour later, sitting on the kitchen floor, the knife still clutched in her white-knuckled hand. Clara. He dropped to his knees beside her. What happened? Are you hurt? Clara looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. Prescott was here. He threatened me. Threatened you. Her voice was hollow. He wants me to convince you to sell. He said if I didn't, accidents would happen. Thomas's face went white, then red with fury. I'll kill him. I swear to God I will. No. Clara grabbed his arm. That's what he wants. He wants you to do something stupid so he can destroy you legally. Then what do I do? How do I protect you from someone like that? Clara looked at him, at this man who had given her everything and made a decision. You fight. We fight. Together. She took his hand and pressed it to her heart. I'm not leaving Thomas. I don't care what he threatens. This is my home. You are my home, and I will die before I let him take that away from us. Thomas pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the only solid thing in a world falling apart. I love you, he whispered. Clara froze. Then she pulled back to look at his face. What did you say? I love you. Thomas's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I've been afraid to say it. Afraid that if I admitted it, something would take you away from me. But I can't keep it inside anymore. I love you, Clara June Brennan, more than I ever thought I could love anyone again. Clara's tears spilled over. I love you too. Thomas kissed her then. Not a gentle kiss, but a fierce one, a claiming, a promise. When they finally broke apart, Clara rested her forehead against his. Whatever comes next, she said, we face it together. Together, Thomas agreed. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Another storm was coming, but this time they would be ready. Word spread fast in small territories. Within days of Prescott's visit to the kitchen, something unexpected happened. Riders began appearing at the ranch gates. Not Prescott's men, but ranchers from neighboring properties. Farmers, shopkeepers, people who had been pushed around by Victor Prescott for years and were finally tired of being afraid. Heard what that snake did to your cook, said a grizzled rancher named Tom Hollis. Heard she held a knife to his throat and sent him running. Clara's face reddened. I don't know how that story got out. Don't matter how. What matters is you stood up to him. Hollis spat in the dirt. Nobody's done that in 10 years. Makes a man think maybe it's time we all stopped cowering. Thomas stood beside Clara, his hand resting protectively on her back. What exactly are you suggesting, Tom? I'm suggesting we fight back, together. Hollis gestured at the dozen men who had ridden in with him. Every man here has lost something to Prescott. Land, money, family. We've been too scared to do anything about it alone. But together... He smiled grimly. Together, we might just have a chance. Thomas looked at Clara. She nodded slightly. All right, Thomas said. Let's talk. The meeting lasted for hours. They gathered in the main house more people than those walls had held in years. Clara served coffee and food, while the men planned and argued and planned some more. We need evidence, said Harris the shopkeeper, who had turned Clara away weeks before. He had shown up looking ashamed and determined. Prescott's been careful, never gets his own hands dirty. If we could prove he's behind the fires, the threats, the intimidation. How do we do that? Buck asked. His men aren't going to talk. Maybe they will. This came from an unexpected source, Jimmy Cole, the young ranch hand, who had harassed Clara when she first arrived. He had been quiet since Thomas dressed him down, but now he stepped forward. I know one of Prescott's men. Grew up with him in Texas. Name's Cody Williams. He's not a bad man, just desperate. Prescott's holding something over him. Thomas frowned. Can you get to him? Find out what he knows. Jimmy nodded. I can try. Owe this ranch a debt anyway. He glanced at Clara. Owe you a debt, ma'am, for how I acted when you first came. I'm sorry for that. Clara studied his face. She saw genuine remorse there. Apology accepted, she said. Now go prove you mean it. Jimmy rode out that night. Clara watched him go, a strange feeling in her chest. People could change, even people who had hurt her. Maybe that was the most surprising thing she had learned since coming to this place. 3 days passed without word from Jimmy. Clara tried to stay busy cooking and cleaning and planning with the others. But her mind kept drifting to dark possibilities. What if Jimmy had been caught? What if Prescott knew they were organizing against him? Thomas found her standing at the window late one night, staring into the darkness. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. He came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I keep thinking about what could go wrong, all the ways this could end badly. And then I think about you, about what you've already survived, about how you held a knife to the throat of the most dangerous man in the territory without flinching. Thomas's voice was soft. And I think maybe we actually have a chance. Clara turned to look at him. You really believe that? I believe in you. That's enough. Clara leaned into him and his arms came around her. They stood there in the darkness, drawing strength from each other. When this is over, Thomas said quietly, I want to marry you. Clara's heart stopped. What? I know it's soon. I know we should wait. But life is short and unpredictable, and I don't want to waste any more time being afraid. He pulled back to look at her face. Clara June Brennan, when this is over, will you be my wife? Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Thomas kissed her, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The danger, the fear, the uncertainty. There was only this, two hearts beating as one. Jimmy returned the next morning. He rode in fast, his horse lathered with sweat. Clara and Thomas ran to meet him. I got it, Jimmy said, sliding from the saddle. I got everything. He told them the whole story. Cody Williams had broken down when Jimmy confronted him. Prescott was holding Cody's sister prisoner, using her as leverage to force him into doing dirty work. But Cody had kept records, dates, times, names. Evidence of every crime Prescott had ordered. He'll testify, Jimmy said. He wants out. He wants his sister safe. He'll tell a judge everything he knows. Thomas's face lit up with hope. Where are these records? Hidden. Cody wouldn't tell me where until he knows his sister is safe. Jimmy hesitated. There's more, boss. Prescott knows something's happening. He's planning to hit the ranch tonight. Big force. Enough men to wipe us out. Clara's blood ran cold. How many? 20, maybe more. He's done waiting. He's going for everything. Thomas turned to Buck. Get everyone ready. We're going to make our stand tonight. The next hours were a blur of preparation. Every man who could hold a rifle took a position. Women and children from the neighboring ranches were sent to safety in town. Clara refused to go. I'm not leaving, she told Thomas. Don't even ask. Clara, if something happens to you, then it happens to both of us. That's what together means. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he pulled her close and kissed her hard. Stay close to the house. Promise me. I promise. The sun set, darkness crept across the land, and they waited. Prescott's men came at midnight. Clara heard them before she saw them, the thunder of hooves, the shouts of angry men. She gripped the rifle Thomas had given her and positioned herself by the window. Here they come! Buck shouted. Gunfire erupted. Clara's heart pounded so hard she could barely think. She saw figures on horseback muzzle flashes, shadows moving in the darkness. A bullet shattered the window above her head. She ducked glass raining down on her shoulders. Clara! Thomas's voice came from somewhere outside. Stay down. She wanted to obey. She wanted to curl into a ball and hide until it was over. But then she heard a sound that changed everything. A woman screaming. Clara ran to the back of the house and looked out. One of Prescott's men had grabbed Eli Murphy's granddaughter, a young woman named Rebecca, who had come to help with preparations. He was dragging her toward a horse. Clara didn't think. She grabbed her rifle and ran. Let her go! The man turned surprise on his face. Clara raised the rifle. I said let her go, now! The man laughed. What are you going to do, sweetheart? Shoot me! Clara pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, but it was close enough to make the man release Rebecca. The girl ran toward Clara, sobbing. Get inside, Clara ordered. Go! Rebecca stumbled toward the house, but the man was recovering, reaching for his gun. Clara's hands were shaking too hard to aim properly. Then another shot rang out. The man crumpled to the ground. Clara spun around. Thomas stood behind her, smoke rising from his pistol. I told you to stay close to the house, he said. I was close to the house. Thomas almost smiled. Come on, we need to get back. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Men fell on both sides, but the ranchers and farmers who had come to help held firm. They weren't professional fighters, but they were fighting for their homes, their families, their way of life. That made them dangerous. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn touched the sky, it was over. Clara stood in the yard surveying the damage. Bodies lay scattered across the property. Some of Prescott's men, some of their own. The cost had been high. Thomas limped toward her, blood on his face from a cut across his forehead. We won, he said. Did we? We held them off. That's something. Clara looked at the bodies, the destruction, the price they had paid. Where's Prescott? Thomas's expression darkened. He wasn't with them. Coward stayed behind and let his men do the dying. Before Clara could respond, a shout came from the main gate. Riders coming, a lot of them. Clara's heart sank. More of Prescott's men. They couldn't survive another attack. Not now. But as the riders got closer, Clara saw something unexpected. Blue uniforms. Badges glinting in the early morning light. It's the marshal, Buck shouted. The federal marshal. Clara grabbed Thomas's arm. How? Thomas looked as shocked as she felt. I don't know. The marshals rode into the ranch yard and dismounted. Their leader, a stern-faced man with silver hair, walked toward Thomas. "Thomas Garrett." "That's me." "I'm Marshal William Barrett. We've had Victor Prescott under investigation for 6 months. Last night we received testimony from one of his men." The marshal's eyes flicked to Jimmy Cole, who stood nearby looking exhausted but proud. "Combined with the evidence that was delivered to our office, we have enough to arrest Prescott and every man who works for him." Clara felt her knees go weak. "It's over." "It's over, ma'am." Marshal Barrett almost smiled. "You folks can stand down. Justice is going to be served." Clara turned to Thomas. His face showed the same stunned disbelief she felt. "We did it," she whispered. Thomas pulled her into his arms. "No, you did it. You gave everyone hope when they had none. You reminded us we didn't have to fight alone." Clara buried her face in his chest and let herself cry. Relief, exhaustion, grief for those they had lost, joy for those who survived. It all came pouring out. Around them, people were cheering, embracing, weeping. The nightmare was finally over. The trial happened 3 weeks later in Denver. Clara testified. Thomas testified. Cody Williams testified. One by one, Prescott's crimes were laid bare before the judge and jury. Land theft, extortion, arson, murder. Victor Prescott sat in the defendant's chair, his face a mask of cold fury. When the guilty verdict was read, he didn't flinch, but his eyes found Clara in the gallery, and she saw something there that made her shiver. Pure hatred. "Victor Prescott," the judge announced, "you are sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on your soul." Clara felt no triumph, only relief that it was finally truly over. Outside the courthouse, Thomas took her hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. They rode back to the ranch as the summer heat began to give way to the first hints of autumn. The land was healing. Fences were being rebuilt. Crops were being planted. Life was returning to normal. But Clara knew things would never be quite the same. She had been through fire and flood and battle. She had held a knife to a murderer's throat and fired a rifle at a man trying to kidnap an innocent girl. She had discovered strength she never knew she possessed. And she had found love. Real love. The kind that saw you at your worst and loved you anyway. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked as they rode side by side. "Everything. Nothing. How much has changed since I stumbled onto your property looking like a scarecrow?" Thomas laughed. "You didn't look like a scarecrow." "I absolutely did." "Fine. You looked like a very determined scarecrow." He reached over and took her hand. "A scarecrow I fell completely in love with." Clara smiled. Flatterer. Truth-teller. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Thomas spoke again. "I've been thinking about the wedding." Clara's heart fluttered. And I don't want to wait. The fall harvest is coming up. After that, things get slow. We could do it then." "That's only a few weeks away." "Is that a problem?" Clara pretended to consider. "I suppose I could clear my schedule." Thomas grinned. "I'll take that as a yes." When they reached the ranch, the hands came out to greet them. Buck clapped Thomas on the back. Eli Murphy hobbled over to shake their hands. Even Jimmy Cole was there, looking less like a troublemaker and more like a man who had found his purpose. "Welcome home," Buck said. "Both of you." Clara looked around at the people who had become her family. The men who had fought beside her, the land that had become her sanctuary. She thought about the woman she had been just months ago. Kneeling in the dirt of Silverton's plaza, clutching her last coins, certain that she would never matter to anyone again. That woman felt like a stranger now. "Clara." Thomas touched her arm. "You all right?" She turned to look at him, this man who had given her a chance when no one else would. Who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. who had loved her back to life. "I'm perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." Thomas smiled, and Clara knew that whatever came next, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That night, Clara cooked a feast. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to celebrate. Celebrate survival. Celebrate justice. Celebrate love. The table was crowded with people, ranch hands, neighbors who had fought beside them, friends who had become family. They ate and drank and laughed until their sides ached. At some point, someone started singing. Old songs, familiar songs, songs that spoke of home and heart and hope. Clara found herself singing along, her voice blending with the others. Thomas caught her eye across the table and mouthed 3 words. "I love you." Clara mouthed them back. "I love you too." Later, when the guests had gone and the house was quiet, Thomas found Clara on the back porch. She was watching the stars, just as she had done so many nights before. He sat beside her and took her hand. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "I want you to know something, Clara. Whatever happens in the future, whatever challenges we face, I will never stop fighting for us. For you. You gave me back my life. I intend to spend the rest of it making you happy." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "You already do." They sat together as the night deepened, 2 survivors who had found each other against all odds. And somewhere in the darkness, a new day was waiting to be born. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and joy. Clara had never imagined she would marry again. After Samuel's death and everything that followed, she had convinced herself that chapter of her life was closed forever. But here she was, standing in her small room at Garrett's Creek Ranch, holding a white dress that Martha Finch had sewn by hand. "You're going to be beautiful," Martha said, fussing with the lace at the collar. "Thomas won't know what hit him." Clara ran her fingers over the delicate fabric. "I still can't believe this is happening." "Why not? You deserve happiness, Clara. After everything you've been through, you deserve all of it." Clara smiled, but something in her chest felt tight, a feeling she couldn't quite name. "What's wrong?" Martha asked. "Nothing. Just nervous, I suppose." But it was more than nerves. It was something darker, something that had been creeping up on her for days. A sense that happiness this complete couldn't last, that something would come along and shatter it. She pushed the feeling down and forced herself to smile brighter. "Help me with the buttons." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm. Clara woke before sunrise, too restless to sleep. She dressed in her work clothes and went to the kitchen where she started making breakfast out of habit. Buck found her there an hour later. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" "Cooking." "It's your wedding day. You shouldn't be cooking." Clara shrugged. "Cooking calms me down. Always has." Buck shook his head but didn't argue. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the table. "You know, when you first showed up here, I gave you about 3 days. Figured you'd be gone before the week was out." Clara smiled. "What changed your mind?" "That first breakfast, those biscuits." Buck whistled. "Never tasted anything like it. Knew right then you were something special." He paused. "The boss knew it too. He just took longer to admit it. He's stubborn. Runs in the family." Buck grinned. "But he's lucky. Luckiest man I know, having someone like you." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Buck. For everything." "Don't thank me yet. Day's just getting started." By noon, the ranch was transformed. People had come from all over the territory. Ranchers and farmers who had fought beside them against Prescott. Shopkeepers who had finally found the courage to stand up for what was right. Families with children, elderly couples, young lovers. The yard was filled with laughter and music, and the smell of food cooking over open fires. Clara stood in her room staring at her reflection in the small mirror. Martha had pinned her hair up with tiny wildflowers. The white dress fit perfectly, flowing around her like a dream. "You look like an angel," Martha said. Clara didn't feel like an angel. She felt like a woman who had walked through hell and somehow come out the other side. A knock at the door made both women turn. "Clara." It was Eli Murphy's voice. "There's someone here to see you." Clara's heart stuttered. "Who?" "Says her name is Margaret. Margaret Brennan. Says she's your mother-in-law." Clara's blood ran cold. She hadn't seen Margaret Brennan since the day the old woman threw her out of her home. Since the day Margaret had produced those papers, those debts, and taken everything Clara owned. "Tell her I'm not available." "Clara." Eli's voice was gentle but firm. "She came a long way. Rode 3 weeks to get here. Says she needs to speak with you before the ceremony." Clara looked at Martha, who squeezed her hand. "You don't have to see her." "I know." Clara took a deep breath. "But maybe I should." She walked out of the room, still in her wedding dress, and found Margaret Brennan standing in the main hall. The woman had aged since Clara last saw her. Her hair was completely gray now, her face lined with new wrinkles. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Clara." Margaret's voice cracked. "You look beautiful." "What do you want, Margaret?" The older woman flinched at Clara's cold tone. "I deserved that." "You deserve worse." "I know." Margaret's hands twisted together. "I came to apologize." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Apologize. You took everything from me. My home, my possessions, my husband's memory. You threw me out with nothing and told everyone I was a disgrace. I was wrong. You were cruel." "Yes." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I was cruel and selfish and blind. I was so consumed with grief over Samuel that I blamed you for everything. For surviving when he didn't. For being young and healthy when my boy was dead." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I'm so desperately sorry." Clara stared at the woman who had destroyed her life, the woman she had hated for months, the woman who haunted her nightmares, and she felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. "Why now?" Clara asked. "Why come all this way after all this time?" Margaret wiped her eyes. "I heard what happened here. The flood, the fire, that evil man Prescott. I heard how you stood up and fought when everyone else was ready to give up." She took a shaky breath. "I realized I had been wrong about you. Completely wrong. You weren't a burden on my family. You were a blessing we didn't deserve." Clara said nothing. The silence stretched between them. "I brought something," Margaret said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather pouch. "These belong to Samuel. He would have wanted you to have them." Clara took the pouch and opened it. Inside was a gold pocket watch and a small daguerreotype, a photograph of Samuel as a young man smiling at the camera. Her hands trembled. "I thought you sold everything." "I couldn't sell these. They were his most precious possessions." Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "He loved you, Clara. I know I said terrible things, but the truth is, he loved you more than anything. If he were here, he would be happy for you. He would want you to have this new life." Clara stared at the photograph. Samuel's face looked back at her kind, gentle familiar, but distant somehow, like a dream she had woken from long ago. "I can't forgive you yet," Clara said quietly. "What you did hurt me in ways you'll never understand." Margaret nodded. "I know. But I'm not going to let it poison my future." Clara closed the pouch and held it against her heart. "Today I'm starting a new chapter. With Thomas. With this family I've found. You can stay for the ceremony if you want, but after that you need to go." Margaret's face crumpled with relief and grief. "Thank you, Clara. Thank you for letting me see you one last time." Clara turned and walked back toward her room. At the door she paused. "Margaret." "Yes. Samuel would have been ashamed of what you did to me, but he also would have wanted me to give you a chance to make it right." Clara met her eyes. Don't waste it. She went inside and closed the door. Martha was waiting, concern written across her face. Are you all right? Clara looked at the leather pouch in her hands. Then she tucked it into a drawer and turned back to the mirror. I'm perfect. Let's finish getting ready. The ceremony took place at sunset. Clara walked through the yard on Eli Murphy's arm, since she had no father to give her away. The old man was beaming with pride, his eyes suspiciously bright. You've come a long way from that dirt plaza in Silverton, he whispered. Thanks to you. Nah, thanks to you. I just pointed you in the right direction. You did all the rest. They reached the front where Thomas waited with the preacher. His face when he saw Clara made everything worth it. The pain, the struggle, the fear. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Who gives this woman to be married? The preacher asked. I do, Eli said. On behalf of all the folks who love her. He placed Clara's hand in Thomas's and stepped back. Thomas leaned close, his voice rough with emotion. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You clean up pretty well yourself. The preacher began the ceremony. Clara heard the words, but they seemed to float past her. All she could focus on was Thomas's face, his eyes, the way his hand trembled slightly as he held hers. Do you, Thomas Wade Garrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. Thomas's voice was steady, certain. I absolutely do. And do you, Clara June Brennan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer in sickness and in health until death do you part? Clara looked at Thomas. This man who had given her a chance when no one else would, who had protected her, fought for her, loved her back to life. I do. The preacher smiled. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Thomas pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her like the world was ending. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. Hello, Mrs. Garrett. Clara laughed through her tears. Hello, husband. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing. Clara danced with Thomas, with Buck, with Eli, with men whose names she couldn't remember. She laughed until her sides hurt. She cried until she had no tears left. At some point she found herself standing apart from the crowd, watching the people who had become her family. Thomas appeared beside her, 2 cups of punch in his hands. Escaping your own party. Just taking it all in. Clara accepted the cup and took a sip. A few months ago, I was kneeling in the dirt with nothing. Now look at me. I am looking at you. Thomas's voice was soft. I haven't stopped looking at you since the day you walked onto this property. Clara turned to face him. Do you remember what you said when you gave me the job 7 days to prove myself? I remember. I was so scared. So sure I would fail, so convinced that the world had no place for someone like me. And now, Clara looked out at the crowd, at Buck laughing at something Jimmy Cole had said, at Eli bouncing a neighbor's baby on his knee, at Martha Finch dancing with her husband, at all the faces that had become familiar, beloved, essential. Now I know that I was wrong, about everything. She turned back to Thomas. I thought I wasn't worth much, that all I had to offer was my cooking. But you saw something else, something I couldn't see in myself. Thomas took her hand. You want to know what I saw that first day when you were standing in the yard covered in dust, looking like you'd walked through hell to get here? Clara nodded. I saw someone who refused to give up. Someone who had lost everything, but hadn't lost herself. Someone with fire in her eyes and steel in her spine. Thomas raised her hand to his lips. I saw the bravest woman I'd ever met. And I knew even then that my life was never going to be the same. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Thomas? I love you, Clara. Not because you can cook. Not because you saved this ranch. I love you because you're you. The stubborn, fierce, kind, beautiful woman who showed me that it was possible to live again. I love you too, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. Thomas pulled her close and they swayed together to the distant music, not really dancing, just holding each other. What happens now? Clara asked. Now we build a life, together. Thomas kissed the top of her head. We run this ranch, we take care of our people, we grow old together. That sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? They stood there until the music stopped and the last guests began to leave. Until the stars came out in full force, blanketing the sky in silver light. Then Thomas took Clara's hand and led her toward the house, toward their future. 1 year later. Clara stood on the porch of the big house watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her hand rested on her stomach, which had begun to swell with new life. Behind her, the door opened. Thomas's footsteps crossed the porch, and then his arms came around her. How are you feeling? Good. A little tired. You should rest more. Clara smiled. You've said that every day for 3 months. And I'll keep saying it until you listen. They stood together in comfortable silence. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and peaceful. The fences had been rebuilt stronger than before. New barns had been raised. Crops flourished in the fields. But the greatest changes weren't visible. They were in the hearts of the people who lived here. In the family that had been built not by blood, but by choice. I got a letter today, Clara said. From Margaret. Thomas tensed slightly. What did she say? She's been helping at a charity for widows in Missouri. Says she wants to make amends for what she did. Wants to help other women who've lost everything. Do you believe her? Clara considered the question. I believe people can change. I've seen it happen here on this ranch every single day. Maybe Margaret's finally becoming the person she should have been all along. Thomas was quiet for a moment. You're more forgiving than I would be. No. I just understand now that holding on to anger only hurts the person holding it. Clara turned in his arms to face him. I wasted so much time being afraid and angry and ashamed. I don't want to waste any more. The baby, Clara smiled. The baby is perfect. Strong heartbeat. Doc says everything looks healthy. Relief flooded Thomas's face. A baby. Our baby. I still can't quite believe it. Believe it. Clara took his hand and pressed it against her belly. This is real, Thomas. All of it. The ranch. The family. Us. It's real, and it's ours. Thomas leaned down and kissed her soft and sweet. I don't deserve you, he murmured against her lips. Stop saying that. It's true. It's ridiculous. Clara pulled back to look at him. We deserve each other. We fought for each other. We earned this. Thomas smiled. Yes, ma'am. They turned back to watch the sunset together. Somewhere in the house, Clara could hear the ranch hands gathering for supper. Buck's booming laugh, Eli's gravelly voice telling a story, the clatter of plates and the clink of glasses, the sounds of home. You know, Clara said, when I walked onto this ranch I told you I wasn't worth much, that all I could do was cook. I remember. I was wrong, so wrong. Clara's voice grew stronger. I'm worth everything. I'm a fighter, a survivor, a wife, a mother. I'm surrounded by people who love me, and I love them right back. That's not nothing, Thomas. That's everything. Thomas pulled her closer. Yes, it is. Clara looked out at the land that had become her sanctuary, at the home she had built with her own hands and heart. at the life she had created from the ashes of everything she had lost. She thought about the woman she had been, the desperate widow kneeling in the dirt clutching her last coins, certain that her life was over. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth, someone who had learned that rock bottom wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. "Clara." Thomas's voice was soft. "Yes. Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a second chance, for showing me that grief doesn't have to be forever, for teaching me how to love again." Thomas's voice cracked slightly. "For saving my life." Clara reached up and touched his face. "We saved each other, Thomas. That's what love does. It finds broken people and makes them whole." The sun slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky awash in purple and gold. The evening star appeared bright and steady. Clara June Garrett stood with her husband on the porch of their home, surrounded by everything she had ever wanted and nothing she had thought she deserved. The past was behind her. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. And for the first time in her life, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She had walked through fire and flood and heartbreak. She had been rejected by everyone who should have loved her. She had knelt in the dirt with nothing but a skillet and a prayer. But she had never given up. She had kept fighting, kept believing, kept putting one foot in front of the other, even when every step felt impossible. And now, standing in the arms of the man who loved her, carrying the child who would continue their story, Clara understood the truth that had carried her through everything. She was worth more than she had ever known. She had always been worth everything. And that was the greatest love story of all.